to our second part of our live stream Q&A, where we are answering all your questions related to social studies, history, the social sciences, the humanities, geopolitics, both past and present. We do this every Friday and Saturday evening, and it's a way you can start off your weekend on the right way by joining us for an hour of Q&A. We had a really fun live stream last night, and then you can keep your weekend going a good way. Um, with the second parter that we do on Saturdays from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you for joining us. If you like history, if you enjoy social studies and things like that, then you are in the right place, just like Carlisle, who is a friendly neighborhood historian. Good to see you, Carlisle. Make sure to like and subscribe, just like Gian has done, one of my loyal friendly neighborhood historians. Becoming a friendly neighborhood historian, joining the legion of over 6,300 subscribers is as easy as liking and subscribing. We also have a Patreon, Substack, and social media handles that hopefully one of my moderators can put in the chat later on. But for the next hour or so, I will be answering all your questions related to social studies, history, and the social sciences. And that's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. And there's our light and everything. I've got my microphone going. I've got my smoking jacket. We're in our new studio. We've got the lights going. Hopefully that makes me look less bad. And as I suspected, I was right all along. So ask me anything about history and I'll tell you how I'm right. We have been doing this as a channel for nearly a year. We will be celebrating our birthday on President's Day weekend, so a lot of special lives and things like that coming up just in a few weeks as we start the month of February. Hopefully, everybody had a good January. My January was far from great, but I'm on my feet. I landed on the right way, and I have all of you and everything. So that's what's really, really impressive. And then we also have we have our friend, we have our we'll be doing special live streams and everything for our anniversary for the channel's birthday on President's Day weekend. So join us then, Valentine's Day, President's Day weekend, where I'll be explaining the history of President's Day. I'll be explaining the presidents that are celebrated during President's Day, the 4 presidents that were born in February. It was a combination of 2 holidays, Lincoln and Washington's birthday. And I will also be discussing with all of you the history of Valentine's Day. So join us for some live stream lectures and some Q&As and all the wonderful things there, as I will be asking and talking a lot about these different issues. So feel free to join us. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really excited to have you all there with us in our year anniversary. We've been doing live streams since May of last year or June, and they have been very successful. A great way to get information and knowledge about the friendly neighborhood history out there to the general public, and a way for me to give back. You guys watch my shorts and my long form videos and enjoy those, hopefully. Then I give back by answering all of your questions about history and social studies and things like that. So if you have a question about history and social studies, you are in the right place. So feel free to ask a question about any of those topics that you are interested in, and I will answer them in a timely manner. And we will be doing this for the next hour or so. I am a little bit in a time crunch, so I started a little bit early, and I'm going to be ending a little bit early as well. But if you enjoy history and social studies and asking questions about it, then you're in the right place. And if you just like looking at the Hefner jacket or listening to the sound of my voice, then you are definitely in the right place. Gaia Han is saying fermentation seems to be such an important prospect in human history, especially important when you consider that refrigeration is so new to civilization. Absolutely. And for the longest time, it was safer to drink beer and alcohol than it was to actually drink water, because the water was always contaminated and you had cholera and things like this. At the same time, milk and other things were constantly fermenting and um, overheating and stuff like that. And salt was a major preservative in the Middle Ages, but it didn't have the power of refrigeration. So refrigeration, using electrical power to keep things cold, was a relatively new concept and something that we all take for granted, especially in the Western world, and something that really didn't exist. Um, so, something that really didn't exist in the Middle Ages. Obviously, they weren't conducting electricity to use in homes in any way, shape, or form. Then, so Fortnite Gamer, good to see you. Freshly Wild, good afternoon. And Running Man, stress, pressure, and displacement. All of those things can lead to more acne. So, Running Man, thank you for loving that. Yeah, great. I know you're being sarcastic, but whatever. Arslan, good to see you. Um, What's the deal with Genghis Khan? Did he really populate Mongolia? Yes, he did, Freshly Wild, and he populated a lot of other regions like that. And what is it? 1/20th of the world has Genghis Khan's DNA, because he had so many lovers and mistresses, and he had so many royal children who went on to populate so many other people. And if you are Asian, you have a much better percentage chance, especially East Asian, of being related to Genghis Khan than you do if you're a Westerner. It's really, really fascinating. I mean, white Europeans are only 8% of the world's population. Europe is the second smallest continent. The other continents are much larger, and because they're much larger, they have many more people, especially Asia. And Genghis Khan was one of the most successful conquerors of Asia, and his descendants conquered Asia and parts of Europe and the Middle East. So obviously that would spread all over. So people like Timur, who created the Timurid Empire in Afghanistan, was a descendant and relative of Genghis Khan, as was Mughal or Babur, who created the Mughal Empire in India in the 15th century. So stuff like that. So the truth of the matter is Genghis Khan did populate a lot. His real name was Temujin. Genghis just means great, and Khan means ruler. That's not his first and last name. That's his title. And he united all of the itinerant Mongolian tribes. And because they were such great cavalrymen, especially with horse archery, they were able to move at great distances. They were extremely fair, judicious, and tolerant of other people's beliefs and practices, as long as they accepted their full control, the Mongols' full control over them. If they did not, then they were ruthlessly savage. They would murder and execute entire populations, sometimes systematically depopulating an area through decapitation or assassination. So, um, anyways, how was morning? Great to see you. So, hopefully, that answers your question, Freshly Wild, about Genghis Khan. And if you like my answer about history, then you might be in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing. Timothy, good to see you. Hello. Jonathan, good to see you. Thank you for bringing those up. I really appreciate that. Whatever you like for samples, you're a free person. So you're Assyrian mixed with Norwegian brick. I am a blood first manifest. Yes, the Norwegians were particularly aggressive and strong today. The first head of the general secretary, I think his name was Triage. He was the first general secretary of the UN, elected in 1946, was Norwegian. And of course, the Assyrians were well known for their brutality. They invented crucifixion, and they basically put hooks in people's mouths and carried them out along in a line of people. So that was how they enslaved populations that they conquered. And no, I do not follow YouTuber Bald and Bankrupt, but I'm well on my way to being there. Spartacus, great to see you. Spartacus, obviously a regular here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Nadir Shah was the last great conqueror in the Mongol tradition. At least one of them. I mean, very successful. The Mongol tradition died out with more modern technology and the advent of gunpowder and ships. And the Mongols never had a formidable navy the way that the Westerners had and other people had formidable navies. So, what's your tribe name? American. Um, he was a Turkmen, ruler of Persia. Yes, that's the Ilkhanate. So there was a Mongol. The Mongols took over Persia. They were known as the Ilkhanate, and they were eventually conquered by the Safavids, who were native Persians, who created the Shiite empire, the Safavids, and that's why centered in Persia, which is now Iran, which is why Iran to this day is a Shiite Muslim country. So hopefully that answers your question. Do you know about any civilizations in South America that you know of? I mean, the Incas are obviously the well-known ones. I mean, when you think of the Central and South American empires that dominated, that the Spanish conquered, the Aztecs and the Incas, they were they were relatively new. They only existed for like a century or so. B, they were far from the only civilization there. And C, the Spanish used their weakened power status and the other natives and their rebellions against these groups to overthrow them and destroy them. And that's how the Spanish destroyed the Incas and the Aztecs. So the Incas are an example of this. You have the buildings of the large cities at high places so you could get closer to the gods, but you could also see your enemies coming and see travelers coming from far away. So you have cities in the hills like Machu Picchu, and Cusco was their capital. Which is why the Emperor's New Groove, he's an Incan emperor, and his name is Cusco, by the way. That's where that comes from if you want to know a little bit about Disney. If you want to know a little bit about DreamWorks, The Road to El Dorado is the story of the Aztecs and the destruction of them by Hernan Cortez, except that the narrative is incorrect. Cortez does not get to defeat the Aztecs without the help of all the native tribes who were sick and tired of paying them tribute, mainly through human sacrifices. So there were some other groups that had predated the Incas that the Incas took from. I forget their names off the top of my head. They had built pyramids and other things, but they were actually very successful things, successful civilizations. And they developed a system of using tassels, quipus, as a way to monitor their banking trades, their political arrangements, their family trees, things like this. And the Incas took them and used them as well. Anyways, that's a little bit about that, Timothy. Lucas is asking, do you like creepypastas? I do indeed. I enjoy scary stories, stuff like that. Um, that are really cool and really interesting. And I have a sweet tooth for getting frightened, so it works on me. Nadir Shah defeated the Mongols, the Ottomans, Russians, Afghans, and Mughals. The Assyrians would force their enemies to grind the bones of their parents. Yep, they were really messed up. They were the first civilization, the Assyrian Empire, to real based in the city of Nineveh. And if you know the story of Jonah, maybe from the Old Testament in the Bible, which obviously might very well be is I'm not saying it's a 100% historical story, but Nineveh was their capital. That is where it's mentioned. That's the story of the destruction of Nineveh, supposedly. But the point being is that the Assyrians were extraordinarily violent and merciless, and basically practiced human sacrifice and all sorts of other really intense practices, just like the Aztecs, by the way, to keep people in line, and were extremely cruel to their slaves and prisoners. So Jason Bender is asking, what about Germany today? There are strong nation. They tore the wall down in 1989. They got rid of communism. What do you think of Germany? Well, I think the German people are resilient, extremely methodical. Germany has always been a very rich resource place, and it has been able to withstand any sort of invader for long periods of time and been able to always find itself a national identity. So Germany was conquered by the Romans, or the Romans tried to conquer it, and the Germans pushed back, and the Romans could never subdue the Germans like they could the Celts and the Gauls, or the Spanish barbarians. The truth of the matter is that the Germanic tribes actually outdid and outlasted the Roman Empire, and many of them moved into Western and Southern Europe and conquered those lands when the Western Roman Empire fell. So the Germanic tribes, rather than being undone by the Romans, were actually the Romans undoing. Later on, when Napoleon conquered the Holy Roman Empire and dissolved it and conquered Germany, the resistance by the German people there led to a nationalist movement where the Germans did everything in their power to develop not just a cultural and linguistic identity, which they shared, but also a political identity that eventually saw Prussia create the German Empire, thanks to the work of a man, the man of iron, Otto von Bismarck, in the 1870s. This German Empire was extremely formidable, really fast, and on pace with all the other empires of Europe, Russia, the Austro-Hungarians, France, and Great Britain, and arguably ahead of them in the sense of their landmass, their large supplies of coal, steel, iron, and wood, and also their manpower. So, this very large German empire instantly became a player in international affairs. They built colonies in Africa, they took over islands, they had forts in Asia, and they became one of the most biggest players in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And then the ambitions of Kaiser Wilhelm II got in the way, and this led to obviously him pressuring other people and kind of starting World War One. And because they lost World War One, or as I like to call it, World War Two, because I don't think the Great War is the first World War. I think the 7 Years' War of the 1750s is actually the first World War. That involved Germany too, by the way. The Germans were extraordinarily methodical, extraordinarily good theorists, and extraordinarily strong and full of willpower, but um, they weren't able to defeat the Allies in World War One. And then after that, Germany was severely punished, but came back strong, rebuilding themselves under the Nazi regime, basically blaming everybody, especially the Jews, for all of their problems. And this led to obviously not just the Holocaust, but also World War II, or as I would call it, World War III. The Allies were able to defeat Germany, and because Germany had been so aggressive for so long, they tore Germany apart. And occupied it and eventually divided it into a pro-Western democracy versus a communist state with ties with part of the Warsaw Pact with sympathies and ties to the Soviet Union. And eventually, when the wall came down in 1989, reunifying the Western and Eastern German divided countries, Germany stood once again as in the middle of Europe with all of its resources and power, all of its economic progress, but with a lot of questions about its identity that continue to this day. So the Germans are a formidable people. They have had empires and very strong kingdoms. I mean, they're the land of the Holy Roman Empire. They're the land of the land of the German Empire. They can be resilient, but they can also be extraordinarily difficult for their European neighbors, as we have seen with World War One and World War Two, or as I call it, World War Two and World War Three. So, Jason, I hope that answers your question in a methodical way, just like a German would want it to be answered. generally speaking. And if I haven't gotten to your comment or question yet, it's because I'm trying to give as thorough an answer as I can. I might need to speed things up because of my time crunch and because we only go an hour and we only have so much time. So be patient. I'm here for you. I'm here to answer whatever questions you have about social studies, history, the humanities, geopolitics, past and present. It's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. And if you like it, consider joining by subscribing. Big Doggy is asking, who was that walking phoenix character played in Gladiator, the movie? I always call him Caesar. And I've done videos about this guy. His name was Commodus. And if that name sounds funny, that's because the commode was named after him. He was such a bad Roman Empire. He basically threw away all of his father's advice and advisors. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Roman emperors in history, and basically did whatever he wanted, trying to style himself as Hercules. He basically, like Nero before him, who was his inspiration, tried to force people to enjoy his forms of entertainment that he provided. And when they didn't, he got mad at them. He basically became more and more tyrannical. He threw Rome into chaos and disarray. Barbarians, mainly Germanic in their origin, invaded time and time again. And eventually, people got so tired of him that they assassinated him. So that's Commodus, the inspiration for a toilet, believed himself to be the best gladiator ever, believed he was the reincarnation of Hercules, the great figure from ancient Greece. So, the demigod. So, Ephraim, hello from Iran. Well, it's great. I'm glad you're here, Ephraim. Good to see you. Make Iran Persia again. That's not good timing with Ephraim just arriving. Turks are dangerous. Every group of people can be dangerous, Raziel. Kay is asking, have you ever heard of the Golden Circle? No. Maybe I have, just under a different name. Jog my memory about it. There's a lot of things I don't know about, and if I don't know about it, I'm going to be honest with you and say, I don't know. Please explain that to me. What does human meat taste like? Nothing I would know. Ask the Assyrians. Timothy Gillis, Southern South America, closer to Argentina. That's not necessarily the Incas. The Incas were in Peru and Venezuela. I don't know a huge amount about that, so I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. Kay saying Iran has always been called Iran by the natives. Persia is actually only a province, Paris. That's interesting. I'll have to see if that's true. Iran comes from an English word applied to it for Aryan. It's kind of because of the Indo-Aryan peoples who not just settled Europe, but settled Turkey, the Middle East, and India. So technically, there is relation and blood shared between white Europeans and dark-skinned Indians, South Indians. Eran Shah is the official name. Aran Shahar is the official name of Iran. That's fascinating. And the ruler of Iran has always been known as the Shah, no matter who is in control, until the rise of the Ayatollahs in the 1980s. What's the road to Compton? Probably a street. Philip Harrison is saying, thank you, Philip. I appreciate you offering. Maybe next week when we're all free. Freshly Wild. Yep, those are all the different Indian tribes. Okay, on a side note, very nice smoking jacket. But where's the pipe? I do have a pipe. I don't smoke in the new studio. If I ever do it outside, a live stream outside where there's more air and everything and ventilation, then yes, I will smoke and you guys can watch that. So hopefully enjoy that. But yes, I do have a smoking jacket. Thank you for identifying it as such. You can call it a dressing gown or a nice robe or whatever you like. I just hope you really enjoy it. And it's part of my new look. I got this as a gift from one of my Patreons. Yes, I do have a Patreon. So Friendly History Patreon, consider joining there as a gift this last Christmas. So shout out to my Patreons. I Love Music, Henry Wright, Ballet Peace, M, and several others. So thank you for joining us there, where you get exclusive content, backgrounds, and early releases and stuff like that. And I'm doing a series right now there about the first ladies of the U.S. So join us and learn about them if you want to become a Patreon. It's as simple. There's a small contribution fee, but you get some early content. You get to learn more about the channel. You get extra history there, and you get the series on the first ladies. So now that I'm done advertising that, but yes, one of my loyal Patreonies gave me this as a wonderful holiday present, and I will be wearing it for a while. Smoking jackets are British in origin. British officer corps following the Crimean War in the 1850s would bring back Turkish tobacco to smoke and to not get the flavor or the smell on their clothes. On their civilian clothes, would wear these really nice dressing gowns that have become synonymous with wealth and affluence, and it's very comfy. It's a little warm today, so I'm a little schweitzy. But anyways, Eric Laponte, hello. Great to see you. Jims, do you think someday we could meet and make Hamburger Helper together? Jim, you name the time and I'm there. Ephraim is saying Iran has different ethnic groups which The Persians are one of them. I'm Gallic Iranian. That's why we don't call it Persia. Interesting, fascinating. Persia might be more of an application from the West because you have the Persian Empire that threatened the Greeks. You have the Parthians who threatened the Romans. Basically, Persia has always had a very strong ruler or even an empire there that has challenged the other existing empires. The Safavids that I mentioned before challenged the uh, sorry, I'm blanking. The Ottomans, the Sassanids challenged the Byzantines, the Parthians challenged the Romans, and the ancient Persians, the Achaemenid Persians, challenged the Greeks until Alexander the Great defeated them. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Hopefully, you've got something nice to drink or are relaxing and enjoying listening to us talk about some friendly neighborhood history. We do history here in a friendly way, and that's what this channel is all about. But Ephraim, you have opened up my mind to a lot of new things, you and Kay and some of the others here. So I'm going to learn a little bit more about the divisions and the different types of Persians. So thank you for telling me that. Mm. And Lucas is saying, "Oh, nice! I really recommend Baraska and Pen Pal. These are the best written creepypasta I've." Interesting. I love audiobooks. I love listening to creepypastas and scary stories. I love reading them. Avid Stephen King reader when I was in high school, and love some H.P. Lovecraft. Really great stuff. Hello, Laura. Everything is great. Yeah. Well, Butterbasket, thank you for sharing your opinion. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do during a live. I mean, I will be doing screencasts and stuff like that when I'm using my Mac. I have done screencasts before. Right now, this is just a Q&A where I'm answering questions about history. Thank you, Kevin. I love what you do too, and that's joining the live. And it's free. It's absolutely free just for you as a way for me to give back, providing content for you, answering your questions, and interacting with the friendly neighborhood history community. That's what we're all here for. Drew, can you talk about and explain Operation Wetback? If I am correct, that was an operation by the United States to bring in Mexican immigrants to fill the void of labor supply during World War II. So I just did a video on Franklin Roosevelt because it was his birthday, and I didn't talk about Operation Wetback, but I talked about obviously the way the Great Depression ended was through World War II, mobilizing men to go fight in the war, while also filling the factories with workers, many of them women, many of them minorities, and yes, many of them immigrants brought from Mexico with I think work visas or maybe even not. But yes, I don't know a huge amount about it, but it was the way the government made up for the shortage in the labor force during World War II, and it increased the amount of Mexicans and Mexican immigrants living in the United States, particularly the Southwest and California. So, name, thank, glory. Oh, a quote from the Bible. Thank you. Russia, TI is saying Russia is the best power in Europe. It has been on many occasions, and Russia usually, when it falls, will catch up to all the other Europeans, go past them, then fall behind, and then catch up, and then fall behind. And they're in the fall behind. We'll see how they catch up this time. That's actually a cycle of Russian history. Tsars like Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, Alexander the Great did everything in their Alexander the Second did everything in their power to catch them up to the other Europeans, and sometimes they even went past them in what they were able to produce. The Russians are extremely ingenious and really, really gritty. And the Soviets found the same problem after the Bolshevik Revolution overthrew the Tsardom and created a communist state, where they were behind the other Europeans in terms of industrialization. Yet Stalin, the man of steel, did this by force and did this by coercion. And yet they caught up, and that coercion actually allowed them to have enough materials available to defeat the Germans in World War II in Operation Barbarossa. But it was very, very close, by the way, and the cost for that was millions of lives lost, thanks to Stalin and his efforts. So, Lucas, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. That is our pinned comment. Spin facts, impeccable speaking. Sorry, Kevin. Yours was pretty good too. William Schreier's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. K, that's an excellent book. You've got it. That's one of the best. Freely available on YouTube. I'll have to check it out. I'm reading a book about Tudor England, but I got one lined up. A.G.P. Taylor is considered the quintessential European historian on World War II. I'm going to read his The Causes of World War II next. Paint the Sky. What are your thoughts on Palestine? Okay, I get asked this almost every live stream, and I'm happy to answer it because you may not have heard it before, and some people may have never heard it before. But basically, my answer on the Palestine issue is Palestine exists. The Palestinians are a real people who deserve their own state. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with historically saying that. People who have lived in a particular region don't get to live there just because they lived there in the past. This is true. Yet the cultural and traditional ties to the land that the Jewish people have had go back 3,000 years. And they have a particularly unique tradition that hasn't died out despite them being displaced from that land on multiple occasions. So the Palestinians, the Arabs, and many of whom are Muslim have ties to that land as well that are traditional and religious as well. So the difficulty is making these two groups live together when basically the Palestinians see Israel and they see not just Israel and Judaism and they see another religion, and the more radical ones see a danger there, but they also see the West basically manipulating the Middle East after World War I to make sure the Jews got a place to live. That ignores the fact that the Jews were already relocating and living in that land for 40 years before World War I in what's called the Zionist movement. At the same time, the Europeans were the ones who gave a blessing, especially after World War II, for the Jews to have their own state and not be bothered by anyone. They did not expect the Arabs to be bothersome to them, and yet that is what ended up happening. And in the crosshairs of Israel becoming a nation, a war ensued. The Israelis won and displaced hundreds of thousands of Arabs. And those Arabs are the Palestinian people. Well, the Arab countries and Muslim countries surrounding them in the Middle East kicked out hundreds of thousands of Jews. And through the years, there have been works of peace agreements and all sorts of things to try to get both sides to work together. There have also been three more major wars: the 1966 Six Day War, the Yom Kippur War of 1973, and of course, the 2023 invasion of destruction of Gaza, as that's what that war will probably be called, or the Nova Music Festival War, because that's where it happened when Hamas attacked. Hamas is a radical Palestinian organization that believes in the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. Um, they attacked Israelis celebrating in different locations throughout Israel, capturing hundreds of them and killing 1,200. And Israel's response was to bomb the living hell out of Gaza, basically leveling it and now leading to a refugee crisis that the world is now addressing as that war winds down. So basically, the truth of the matter is, that area will not see peace until both sides agree to play nice, and that is the biggest, tallest uh, um, que- quest that the international community sees itself with this year, and for the foreseeable future. How do we get the Gazans, the Palestinians, and the Israelis to live together and play nice with one another? Now that is an objective, and I think they have to, or else it's destruction. And that is an objective as an objective as an opinion as I can give. I welcome everyone's perspectives, no matter where they come from. This is a very heated issue. I'm on the internet. I see how much it divides people, but I think that's what a historian can tell you. And obviously, that's not going into the details of the Palestinians who had settled and set up settlements and territories and land in the Levant, the western region of the Middle East, for centuries before the Jews resettled there. So, um, Jalen, I'm sorry I'm doing that to you. That was not my intention. Gunners, and Jesus Christ, the spot is okay. Coyote Jag. I have a few William Schreier books. Berlin Diary, 1941. Really interesting guy. Really knew a lot about history. Um, Jalen Showers is saying, I'm too high to know what's going on, but he is World War. Okay, I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that. Technically, I think there have been three world wars, so you'll be correct that the next one would be the Fourth World War. So, and yes, I do smoke a pipe while wearing that robe, BR. Dark Souls. Hi from the UK. What is your channel about? My channel is about history and social studies. Hopefully, you've picked that up. I know I'm behind, but I'm doing my best to catch up with the chat as much as I can. BR, great question. Was Tiberius underrated? Yes. I think a lot of people look at his debauchery and things like this that have been kind of overly dramatized in history, and they look at how fearful and cynical and paranoid he was, which he certainly was. There's no doubt about it, but they don't see how Rome actually advanced and got more powerful and prosperous, and how he basically made the empire rich by just sitting on all the money from Augustus's reign and kept the empire safe. He was a good administrator and all of that. He just wasn't the nicest person. You wouldn't want to meet him, and you wouldn't have enjoyed any of his things. Basically, it was a ditty party at Tiberius's villa on the island of Capri. So Nafi is saying your historical knowledge is that of the Jewish brainwashing and is false and fake and gay. Exactly how the synagogue of Satan likes the masses. There's no way to respond to that. There's no way. Check out the Talmud. I've read the Talmud. Dark Souls. For a long time, the USA and UK had what is called a special relationship. In light of your recent political changes, do you think it still exists? Excellent question, Dark Souls. Yes. I think it does. I think there's a shared history and commonality. Basically, the English and the Americans realized in the middle of the 1800s that it was better to actually like and work together than it was to hate each other. They had fought the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and had almost gone to war over the Northwestern Territory that eventually became Vancouver for the Canadians and Washington, Idaho, and Oregon for the Americans. So the truth of the matter is, Dark Souls. Um, After that, the Americans and the British started working together. They realized they had a similar heritage. They had similar religions. They had of course, they had the same language, and that they were better together, working together, than they were working separately. And so that has led to better cooperation and relations that have basically brought the U.S. into two world wars. And have allowed it to grow its international prestige and power, while the British Empire was advocated and maintained in part by the Americans until after World War II. I did not GE logos, but thank you for checking. Um, Big dog, yeah, I appreciate that, but I just like people sharing and joining in. So again, I'm doing my absolute best to get through as many of the comments as I possibly can and answer you guys in a timely manner. We've got about 20 more minutes or so, so I promise if you don't get answered today, join us for our live stream lecture tomorrow, and I will put aside time for Q&A after that. I haven't picked a lecture topic, so if anyone has any topics they want me to discuss, think about offering that up. I also take those suggestions usually on my Patreon, so consider joining there. And yes, like and subscribe like Eric Lapointe did. Thank you, Eric. Texas Repo saying, we smoke whatever I want in my house. We can smoke cigars, we can smoke salmon, whatever you want. Smoke salmon. Ah, clever. That was clever. Lox, as it's called by the Jewish. Drew Peanuts, how and who decided to make Gerald Ford VP after Spiro Agnew? Was there a law in place? Wasn't he the minority House leader? Yes, he was the highest ranking Republican in the House of Representatives. He had always wanted to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And so when bribery caught up to Spiro Agnew, Nixon's first vice president, Ford, with a long pedigree, became the obvious choice because he seemed like an honest guy who could work across the aisle with the Democrats. And with Nixon embroiled in Watergate and everything, it made sense. Now, before this, presidents hadn't replaced their vice president. Vice presidents had resigned, vice presidents had died, and presidents had left it vacant. Franklin Pierce's vice president died in office, he left it vacant. Martin Van Buren's vice president abandoned his campaign, so Van Buren didn't have a vice president. And now, the 25th Amendment, which had shorn up the presidential succession line, making sure that the vice president would be the first in line, followed by the Speaker of the House in third place, and then the President pro tempore of the Senate, then the cabinet members, starting with the Secretary of State on downwards. Basically, it was agreed upon that a president needed to replace a vice president if he died or resigned or something like that. So when Agnew resigned, Nixon needed to replace him. Right, this was 8 years after the 20th Amendment, and 25th Amendment, and he replaced him with Gerald Ford, who became president, the only man to never be elected to either, and probably not want to be either vice president or president. And he had to pick a vice president, so he picked Nelson Rockefeller. So, Drew, that's a little bit about the history of Gerald Ford succeeding Spiro Agnew. Elephant, please don't do that. That's not nice of you. Allied Cruz, the Persians are here. I'm here. What's up? What's up? It's great to hear you. Okay, before you go to Alexander, you should know about Xerxes. I do know about Xerxes. The Persians were extremely formidable and with the Medo-Persians or Achaemenid Persians had totally wiped out the Babylonians, the Neo-Babylonians of Nebuchadnezzar the Great, who had wiped out the Assyrians, who I was talking about earlier. So I do know who I'm talking about. And Xerxes is the Persian emperor, by the way, who I successfully defeated the Greeks at the Battle of Thermopylae when he defeated the 300 Spartans and the 1,000 Greek soldiers that nobody cares to talk about who were helping them. And he put the Greeks on hold. I think they burned Athens, if I'm correct. They really did a number on the Greeks. This is before the Greeks were united by Philip and then his son Alexander, who eventually took the fight to the Persians and completely decimated them. So if you're still here, Ali, I do know a little bit about that. Sorry, Ali. Crowshell saying, why couldn't the kid in the pirate costume see the movie? Because it was rated R. Thank you. A pun. That makes everything good. Yes, that's true. The Hashishin. Yes, Ali, that is correct. And you also have the first shock troops of all time, the Immortals. Very fascinating. I will not, Fiona. You are welcome. Joshua Hagan, Nancy Reagan was, yes, I've heard that. She had a very troubled past before she met Ronnie. And he did too before that. Crochelle again. How often do I make jokes about chemistry? Periodically. See, I did the inflection there. I knew it was going to be a pun, so I appreciate that. That was funny. We need something to lighten up the mood sometimes. Ali. Dude, Mexicans fought so many wars for USA in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. Yeah, there's been a lot of cooperation between the Mexican people and the United States. Except the fact that they fought two wars against Americans in Texas, and of course the Mexican-American War of the 1840s. Um, Zenek, hello from St. Petersburg. Great to see you, Zenek. Wonderful to have people from all over the world. I love it when we have people from, we have people from Iraq, and we have people from Finland. We have people from Canada. We have my wonderful moderator Simon the Bunny, who is not with us today, is from Canada. I mean, the UK. So, although this is an American channel, we've got people from all over the world, and I really love to see it. So, thank you for joining us, Zenek, from St. Petersburg in Russia. From Russia with love. Drew Peanuts is asking, wasn't Operation Wetback a massive I might be confusing it, so I might be incorrect. Yes, ping pong, you've got it. Shout out to Jesus because why? All right. How come laws change over time, like laws about racism and pedophilia? Caleb, great to see you. Always a pleasure to have you on here. But basically, laws change throughout time because people come to a better understanding of human morality and human understanding. The argument for centuries wasn't do you own slaves? It's do you mistreat the slaves that you own? Basically, an understanding is that wealthy people, be they rulers, be they nobles, be they merchants, be they warriors, be they generals, will own slaves. It's how do you treat your slaves? It was only in recent history that slavery has become absolutely forbidden and hated in the Western world. So the development of morality and the understanding of human rights has changed and expanded over time. Meanwhile, Joshua Hagan is asking, why don't Arab countries around Israel want to assimilate the Palestinians? Because they don't see the Palestinians as some of their own people. There is fear. There was fear during the war between Gaza and Israel that the Gazans in the south that were trying to flee were going to be killed because they weren't let into Egypt. They weren't let into Egypt because the Egyptians shut their borders because they're terrified of Hamas and and other Palestinian radicals joining the Muslim Brotherhood and basically overthrowing the Egyptian government, which is run by the military and has been for the last 7 decades. Jordan and Lebanon are basically just as much as discriminatory against the Palestinians as the Israelis were, and the Jordanians were shooting down rockets sent from Iran into Israel when Iran attacked Israel last year. So the truth of the matter is the other Arab countries and Muslim countries of the Middle East do not want to assimilate large numbers of people who are from different branches of Islam, like the Iranians are Shiite and the Palestinians are Sunni. And there's already enough chaos with the Islamic State in Iraq, and you also have Syria and the revolution there. So there's already a huge amount of chaos and difficulty. So because of that, why would they want to? Assimilating the Palestinians is a huge chore for them. So they're not. It's not something that they're particularly interested in. Caleb is asking, did they find out who actually attacked the Siberian Music Hall, or was it actually the Middle Eastern terrorist organization? I think it was. Nobody has really investigated it, and I don't trust Putin as far as I can from him. So who knows? Maybe that will be uncovered in years to come. It's like the United States. Maybe we're finally finding out, possibly, who killed JFK. Still not sure about that yet, though. Ray is asking, where do Austrianism and Melanism originate from? African descent. Ostracism. I don't know what those are. Are you referring to different ethnic groups? Interesting, Ti. Within the 67 border, some Hamas recognizes Israel. Why do racists, and now Caleb's asking, why do racists call black people monkeys if they don't have monkey DNA in them? White people actually have monkey DNA in them, black people do. I don't know. Racism, because they're from Africa. They think of Africa. They think of because racism, like any form of discrimination, you throw together everything you know about an area, and it's usually very little, and you just assume and broadly generalize it. So they assume that black people, they use that title for blacks because they assume that black people are from Africa, and so they're close to these animals, so they might as well be these animals. It is extremely stupid, Caleb. You're absolutely right. Some random guy. Favorite general besides Patton? I'd have to go with U.S. Grant. Unconditional surrender. Uncle Sam. Ulysses Simpson Grant changed his name to Hiram to Ulysses because Ulysses is a character of strength, and boy was Ulysses S. Grant extremely strong during the Civil War. Basically, tied down Robert E. Lee and was the only one who could successfully defeat him in battle, and did so. And at Appomattox Courthouse, Lee got to see Grant, who was once his subordinate, who he had cursed out for not having proper attire, slovenly with a stained nasty uniform and Lee's impeccable uniform, and Lee was the one to surrender to Grant. So Grant got the last laugh against Lee and is the only one who Lincoln could use successfully in the eastern front of the war to defeat the Confederates. Grant had already ripped the Confederacy apart in the West, which undermined their efforts in the East. Then he went to the East and handled Lee himself because, as Lincoln said, I need this man. He fights. So, yeah. Other than Patton, got to go with Ulysses S. Grant. Not as good of a president as he was a general, but great, great general in American history. Mike Jones, beautiful lady. Thanks. Don't identify as one, but I'll take that compliment in the spirit it was given. Caleb, was Trump at the Diddy parties in Epstein's Island? No. At least as far as we know, we don't. It doesn't seem that he was. And if he was, then we are never getting the Epstein files released. Russians love you. And I love the Russians. They are fascinating. I've done an entire series on the history of the Russian czars. I do a lot of Russian history stuff. My master's thesis was on Russian history. So, yeah, you are in the right place if you love Russian history. Caleb is saying, I heard the first edition of Playboy is illegal because Hugh Hefner, who I'm related to, obviously, because of this, obtained Marilyn Monroe's nudes illegally. Is that true? I've heard that before, that there was a legal battle between Monroe and the Playboy Association, and Playboy had to pay her money. I'm not 100% sure, though. But, hey, I'm not Hugh Hefner just because I have the robe, but I am borrowing it from him, so hopefully one day I'll get it back if I ever hear back from him. Thai Boxer is asking, why did California make Lake Tulare way smaller? It used to run through the middle of the state. I don't know if they made it much smaller. Probably the main reason that California has had problems with water supply is environmental concerns that have led to them shortening the water supply. Environmental changes, climate change, things like that can lead to a shrinking. You have droughts that are becoming more and more common in California that can lead to the shrinking of lakes and things like that. So that would be what I would think, Ty. I don't know exactly. Dark Souls, thank you. Articulate, intelligent, enlightening. I'm off to bed now. It's fine. Midnight. Well, good night to you, and thank you for that lovely comment on the way out. And you described this channel perfectly. So thank you, Dark Souls. Banda, hey man, how have you been? You used to. I did not do that. I did not do that, Banda, but good to see you, anyways. Anyways, the real historians know that aliens build our civilizations. Sankey, I love it when anyone says the real historians know, because the real historians know that your real historians are wrong. I'm not saying I don't know about extraterrestrial life. I'm not commenting on that, but historians work in what we know and what we have. So, let me see. Why is Michigan's Upper Peninsula part of Michigan and not Wisconsin? It's connected to Wisconsin. I think because that territory was taken first from the French and Indians during the French Indian War of the 1750s by the British, and then it was divided, and that land was given to the U.S. after the American Revolution. And so I think it's always been part of Michigan because it was originally acquired at first by the British. That would be my best understanding there. Yeah, KDR, same thing. You're using the real historians thing. Chala Chala is asking, do you believe in the conspiracy of divide and conquer? I don't believe it's a conspiracy. I believe it works. When you are able to divide people and when you're able to blame people, you are able to get far. Watch my videos on the Nazis. Watch my videos on what happened in the Holocaust and what caused it. It was dividing the German people between the desirables and the undesirables, and the undesirables lost more and more rights, and those rights, lands, and wealth were given to the desirables. And that eventually led, obviously, to horrifying human atrocities. Harsonet, can you explain, great to see you again. Can you explain in a little bit of depth what 6,000-year history clock you mentioned yesterday? Yes, so I believe, and I had this explained to me by a professor in college, so I am not the one who made it up, but basically, if we are to think of history, recorded history, where people live in civil cities and write things, history is like a clock. You've got it going all the way around with 12 hours. The hours, and if you take 6,000 years of recorded history and you divide it by 12, you get 500 years. So the first hour is 4,000 BC to 3,500 BC, and so on. And so the United States, although of interest to so many people and extraordinarily influential, its history only covers 250 years if you're excluding Columbus and the settlement by the Europeans, and you're just wanting to talk about the U.S., because we're about to have our 250-year celebration, bicentennial and a half next year. That is 250 years. That's only half an hour, because an hour is 500 years and 250 is half of 500. So Columbus and the settlement of the Western Hemisphere by the Europeans is only in the last hour of history. Before that, you have 5,500 years of recorded history of things going on before then. So hopefully you guys enjoyed learning about that. And if you enjoyed any of my answers or what I'm talking about, please like and subscribe. Um, Chala Chala, again, have you heard about the politics of fear as a state to keep people in perpetual fear? Yes, because fear is extremely powerful and gets people to do things they normally wouldn't do and give up rights they never did. Any recommendation for Civil War book names? If you want to learn about Lincoln, Goodwin's her name. I don't know her name off the top of my head, but one of the best historians is Goodwin. She wrote several books about great leaders, including one about Abraham Lincoln. So check that out. Santiago Mendoza, was Jesus gay? Honestly curious. Well, I don't know if he was gay or honestly curious, if that's what you're asking. But the truth of the matter is, from what we can understand of the accounts of Jesus's life and the testimony afterwards, he was probably a celibate rabbi who did not display any homosexual tendencies. Um, Let me see here. Oh, Zykes, you're back here again, and all I have to say is yikes. Anyways, how far do you think the Attack on Titan is real to this world? I don't know enough about Attack on Titan, so I'm gonna have to look into it more, Sonia. So I can't say so. I don't know. An elephant shoe. You also need a little bit of a timeout. Freshly wild. Okay. What do you think about Palestinians moving back to North Gaza? What will be short and long term results? Well, the land belongs to them, and they are slowly but surely developing their own society. So um, they have a right to move back there. And I think that really my attitude is simple, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And I don't know why more people haven't said it, but Israel should be responsible, along with the help of the United States and with the watchful eye of the international community, for rebuilding the Gaza Strip. At the same time, the Palestinians and the rest of the world need to agree to root out and destroy Hamas, and not allow them to ever achieve political power again in Gaza or in the West Bank. And therefore, there needs to be, and then Netanyahu should stand up for elections because he hasn't stood for elections during this whole thing. And the PA should stand for elections. Their president, Abbas, has been there for way too long. And so it just seems logical that if you break it, you buy it. And Israel broke Gaza to do this, which shows the horrifying amounts of hatred and tenacity by both sides in getting what they want. But it also shows the need to rebuild that land and rebuild it maybe with the Israelis in a olive branch, extending the olive branch, doing so to help the Palestinians get back on their feet. And maybe that's how we start getting to the drawing board and talking about the non ceasing the talks of destruction and beginning the talks of mutual cohabitation. So, Sonia, that's basically my opinion. I don't know why more world leaders aren't for it. Um, I don't see what's going to happen. I don't see it happening, but it's not hard to do, especially with the U.S. helping. Gaia Han, why did Russia give up on landing a man on the moon? Did Glushkov and Korolov's bickering ruin this CCCP's chance of getting there? Well, basically, I think that the Soviet Union's economic stagnation during the 1970s, under the Brezhnev administration, under Premier Leonid Brezhnev, who was pretty brutal but not very effective. I think the détente, I think things like that, where the U.S. and the Soviet Union started to have at least more openly peaceful relations and stop worrying about outdoing each other on every single thing. I think that kind of took the wind out of their sails, and I just think they couldn't do it at the end of the day. They were never capable of keeping their military on par with their domestic achievements and their technological achievements. So while they had gotten a big start in the space race, they just couldn't keep pace with the U.S. in space, nor could they militarily and economically during the 1980s, which helped lead to their collapse. Any good documentary on British Industrial Revolution or any book? I was watching one on Victoria, which is during the Industrial Revolution. Um, I think there's a couple of good ones here on YouTube. I don't know one off the top of my head. Um, there are very good books on the Gilded Age in the United States, and they apply to Britain too. And I think everyone should learn who the Luddites were and how they tried to stop industrialization, Sonia. So any good books on the Luddites you can find. Luddites, the Luddites, would be good. Harsonet is asking, what do you think of Benjamin Harrison or Grant's presidencies and why? Harrison, not so good. Um, and Grant, mediocre. Grant screwed up when it came to dealing with the Native Americans, and just the amount of corruption in his administration undermined all of his efforts to fully integrate blacks into civil rights following the end of the Civil War and Reconstruction. And also, he was not able to put down to he was not a good judge of character. He was never corrupt himself by any account, but but the people he put up committed all sorts of scandals, and people basically just said the government told the government to screw off with whiskey rings, with credit mobilier. So Grant didn't know how to handle the reins of government and didn't know how to pick the right people for the jobs. But I think he was an admirable man who had a lot of great ideas, like full integration, civil rights, Reconstruction. He destroyed the Ku Klux Klan. He gave us the 15th Amendment. He was a successful president, but he had things he could have done that he just failed to do, and it was mainly because people saw his administration as corrupt, and that let the Democrats take back control of Congress in the midterms of the 1870s. And that, mixed with economic problems, kind of ruined Grant's ability to become a great transformational president, just like Lincoln had been. And Benjamin Harrison just signed a horrible tariff bill, and it ruined the American economy. And Harrison lost badly to Grover Cleveland. Probably should never have been president. Cleveland probably should have won both of those elections. KDR, was the Titanic really the Olympia? I don't. I think that was the original name, and then they scrapped that name. No pun intended. Caleb is asking, do you support the theory Boris Yeltsin was killed by Putin? Shellfish allergic reaction can mimic heart attacks. This is actually Boris Yeltsin's birthday. So to the one democratically elected president of Russia, yes, it's very possible that shellfish in his food could have killed him. And Putin has done this before. Putin could have done it back then. So I don't put anything past that guy. Do you think white man was wrong for what they did to Native Americans? Terry, yes. I don't. Underboss, great to see you, my wonderful subscriber, Underboss. I'm going to speed up because we're running out of time here, but Caleb is asking, why did Jesse Owens not experience racism when he went to Germany? He certainly did, and get treated really good by Hitler at the Berlin Olympics if he was black. Hitler refused to shake his hand. Hitler did not want much to do with him. They were definitely treated racist. It was disproving the entire notion of the Ubermensch, and watch my video on that, my series on the Olympics when they were going on at Paris this year. They did treat him pretty badly. He felt that he was representing the United States well, and he certainly did. And he embarrassed the idea of the blonde hair, blue eyes being the best in the world by showing that a black skinned African man or a black skinned African American man could trounce them in a running competition. Do you think Chala is asking? Do you think the British royal family are shapeshifters? Only in terms of their behavior and attitudes. Jesus, Mary, Magdalene. What era of American history do you have the best knowledge of? Hopefully, every one of them. I try to have as much knowledge about any history that I learn about Hearts and It's just what we do here on the channel. Thank you. Thank you. As Daily Sideshow, you should be a comedian. You got the face for one. Yes. As Lincoln said, if I was Two-Face, why would I be wearing this one? Gayahan, do you know anything about the Kingdom of Jerusalem, King Baldwin? King Baldwin, there were several Baldwins, but Baldwin the Fourth is the one you're thinking about. He was the one who had leprosy and wore a mask to cover it, and actually put the fear of God into the Muslims, and was able, with the help of other European principalities, to defeat many of the Muslim fighters, including the Ayyubid Sultanate and Saladin the Great. And it was only after his death that Saladin could reconquer Jerusalem for the Muslims. But yeah, a really fascinating guy. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was a French origin kingdom that ruled over Jerusalem and the provinces around it in the Holy Land from 1100 to 1187. And Baldwin IV was their king, who had leprosy, who was only a boy, but was somehow able to withstand and defeat the Muslim forces. Was Hitler a socialist at heart when you really look at it? Yes, he was. I don't know how, but he was just a socialist who hated other socialists, just like Stalin hated other socialists and had them killed. Underboss, Israel is cooked. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll see. Caleb, Karl Luz long died in the war in Italy because Hitler sent him there to help Mussolini rearm prisoners, punishment for losing to Jesse Owens. Interesting. Probably did. Hitler was extremely vindictive. Disco Dave, thoughts on Chomsky? I think I don't know enough about him. I know about his politics and I know about his linguistics. I don't know about his commentaries on history, so I would have to know more to comment about that. Let me see here. Then what Cold War president would you say had the best impact against communism for the U.S.? I think Reagan wins that one, only because of the aggressiveness. It did have its downsides. I'm not saying Reagan was perfect, but if you watch my full-length video about Reagan, I think Reagan was extraordinarily successful at undermining the Soviet Union by beating them at their own game, by military spending and things like that. And they were already breaking all the rules of détente and a strategic arm limitation. So Reagan showed, why don't we beef up the economy and the military at the same time? We'll spend a lot, but they can't keep pace, and they certainly could not. Caleb, Grant didn't destroy the Ku Klux Klan. He destroyed the first major incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan. The reason it exists today is because it keeps rising up with different factions and different phases and everything. So, um, and MH, you scrolled into the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we talk about history and social studies. Manteca, that's fascinating. General Lee would be, you are related to General Lee. Oh, sorry, Manteca. Yeah, General Lee, Robert E. Lee would be considered the best general in U.S. history and maybe even world history if he had not joined the Confederacy. He is the only reason they almost won the war. So, Jesse Owens said he got waved in at the streets, and Hitler smiled and waved at him, and he said people stopped him in the streets to congratulate him, and he said they were actually pretty nice to him. And that is something that I have heard about German society before, and many societies where there is a niceness, but there is definitely an exoticism and racism that's more subtle and underneath. And Hitler was really frustrated by Owens winning. Um, so, Sonia, how does Israel hide its nuclear power from the USA, and why doesn't? Because the U.S. Why does Israel hide its nuclear prowess from the USA? Because the USA is the reason that Israel has nuclear power. Do you know about the Donahue? I do not, Mantek. I would have to learn more. Um, yeah, that's true. It was indeed Franklin Roosevelt. And Franklin Roosevelt, although he did a lot of good things, is, in my opinion, an overrated president who is pretty much a racist. He refused to sign anti-lynching legislation because he didn't want Southern Democrats to abandon the Democratic Party, and he also refused to desegregate the military. He turned away a ship of Jews who were fleeing the Holocaust, even though his wife begged him to let them in. And of course, he interned Executive Order 9066. He interned hundreds of thousands of Japanese people without any due process of law. Absolutely awful. Um, let me see. Thoughts about Howard Zinn. History from Below, a new perspective on history brought to you by a white man. That's what I think of Howard Zinn, Disco Dave. Magnetic VR. Hey, what's up? Great to see you. Chala Chala. They are racist, the Proud Boys, so don't listen to them. Who got kicked out of 109 countries? Which 109 countries, and what did those 109 countries do? Harsonet, because the McKinley tariff didn't help the American economy rebound. It did not. It only hurt imports. It raised prices. It made things difficult. All the drawbacks of tariffs applied to Benjamin Harrison's tariff policy with the McKinley tariff. Yep, Caleb, I believe that Nixon was an alcoholic. How did you get so educated in world affairs? I learned, I read, and I just committed it to memory as best as I could. And let me see. Armenia, the newest Zealander? I don't think so. Sonia, do the Jews hate the Germans today? No. There's been a lot of forgiveness, and there's been a lot of healing and apology. I'm sorry, Scott. You should probably not go near parks for reasons that are beyond me. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up because I've got places to be, and I'm sorry for cutting it short early. But I did catch up to the chat and answer all of your questions, so I hope you really enjoyed that. If you haven't done so, like and subscribe. Thank you for joining the Friendly Neighborhood History channel for our live stream Q&A part 2, where you were involved in hopefully some really good discussions. So thank you for keeping up all of the great topics and everything. And I really appreciate everyone for being here. Thanks, some random guy. Thanks, Spartacus. Toilet bowl. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Guys, like and subscribe. Join us for the live stream lecture tomorrow, and maybe we'll do a little Q&A at the end because this has been really fun. Been a great weekend with all of you. And Chala Chala, last question of the day I'll take. Why is Islam becoming so appealing to young white reverts in Europe? I don't think it has. I think a lot of white people are actually threatened in Europe by the presence of more and more Middle Eastern people who bring Islam with them. So, oh, interesting. Yes, I've heard that, Caleb. Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg, who worked together on TED, survived 9/11. Yeah. So please hit the like and subscribe. Thank you for being based, like Hype B Viking certainly is. And Benjamin Harrison was another great guy who meant well, and he did help out the Civil War veterans, but it cost a lot. So Harsonet, I understand where you're coming from in sympathizing with Benjamin Harrison, and McKinley was a much better president than Harrison. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad that you were here, Chala Chala. You had so many great questions. I hope you take care, and all of you have a wonderful Saturday night. Go out and party and have a great time. But before you do that, like and subscribe, join the channel, check out my new and old, long and short form content, and consider the Patreon. So, the lecture tomorrow, I'm not 100% sure. I'm leaning towards explaining something I talked about at the beginning. In fact, I am going to do this because I've been wanting to do this for so long. Why do I think World War One, the war to end all wars, is not the First World War? And what was the First World War? A hint: it's called the 7 Years' War. So you're going to get a full history about that. And if you like learning about wars, check out my last two live stream lectures: one on the English Civil War and one on the 30 Years' War. So take care. I hope all of you have a really wonderful Saturday, and I will see you tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the live stream lecture on the First Real World War. So take care and have a great night. Tell all your friends, like and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow and in channel. Bye bye. Adios. And remember, love history.